The unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, we can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Well, we've just celebrated our festival of Samantabhadra Bodhisattva. First, people sometimes ask, what is a bodhisattva? Well, it can mean anybody who is on the path to enlightenment. Enlightenment being bodhi, bodhisattva. Sattva means being, so that's us. Bodhisattvas, beings on the path to enlightenment. We're bodhisattvas with a little b, training, bodhisattvas in training. Then there are the bodhisattvas with a big B, Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, Manjusri, bodhisattva of wisdom, Kishtigarbha, the bodhisattva who lives in hell and protects all beings who are vulnerable and in difficult situations. Maitreya, the Buddha that is to come. Of all of these, Avalokiteshvara is the most well-known. Everybody loves Kanzeon, Avalokiteshvara, bodhisattva of compassion. And Samantabhadra tends to sort of take second place, but we'll come to him in a minute. People see bodhisattvas in different ways. Some people actually, they see them as actual beings. Some people pray to them. Some people even see them appearing in this world. And many people see them as representing positive attributes or qualities that we can cultivate. And I tend to see them in this way. Something we can aspire to. Compassion, wisdom, loving kindness, protecting beings, helping those in difficult circumstances, and universal goodness. Samantabhadra is the bodhisattva of universal love or universal goodness. And in the litany that we chanted today, the litany of Samantabhadra, which I think comes from the Avatamsaka Sutra, is said to be like empty space. Bodhisattva is like empty space, continually flowing everywhere in the universe, filling all things, just like space. We don't see space, we see through it. So we can kind of miss it. We don't see Samantabhadra because he's everywhere. We can kind of see through him. In the Avatamsaka scripture, which is a huge scripture, filled with Buddhas and Bodhisattvas on a massive scale, the Bodhisattvas are looking for Samantabhadra and they can't see him anywhere. Where is he? Where is he? We don't see him. And it turns out that he's so big they can't see him because he's permeating everything. Oh, he's right here, you know. Space pervades everything, more than we can see. As you might know, it turns out that all these seemingly solid things of the world, including our own bodies, actually mostly made up of space, with little atoms whizzing around. And then those little atoms whizzing are made up of space with smaller things, electrons and the like, whizzing around, and smaller to infinity, it would seem. Is anything there at all? You know, it's pretty impressive, actually. It's wonderful. I love it. Everything's mostly space, although it may appear to be solid. And the reason things don't just pass straight through each other is because of magnetic forces. I think that's great. It's not stuff, it's magnetic forces that stops things banging into each other. How could you know that? How could you imagine that? We can't see that, but people find it out with science. And I think it's lovely that just about everything, there's nothing there really. And in the same way, universal goodness pervades everything, but mostly we don't see it. We see all the awful things that go on, the dreadful things that happen, the suffering, cruelty, injustice, disease and all that. And we might think, universal goodness? Well, where is it? I don't see it, you know. The kindness and goodness of people, we tend to think of as the exception rather than the rule. But actually there's lots of it. Kindness and goodness in beings. We have kindness and goodness. Even when we're crabby, there's kindness and goodness within us. just to kind of have faith in that. There is goodness everywhere. There is universal goodness. There is Buddha nature that permeates everything. Everything is part of Buddha nature, that universal goodness, including us and our petty thoughts and little desires. We just don't tend to see it like space. Well, Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva of universal goodness, is not only something we just can't see and we have to somehow believe in it. We can actually practice universal goodness. And this helps us to see it. Samantabhadra is the Bodhisattva of practice. In many depictions, you've got Shakyamuni Buddha in the center of a triad. And Samantabhadra is on one side, and Manjusri is on the other. Manjusri represents wisdom, and Samantabhadra represents practice. They go together. You can't just have wisdom and not practice. You can't just, if you just have practice with no wisdom, you're not going to do very well. Wisdom and practice, like compassion and wisdom. Wisdom and practice go together. They work together. And Samantabhadra is practical. And this is what I feel is the most important aspect for us to put into practice, because he represents Buddhist practice, our Buddhist practice, our training in meditation and keeping to the precepts. This is Samantabhadra, helping us to put it into practice, not just think about space or loving kindness or whatever, actually practice it. And again, is really big, because Buddhist training is really big, really powerful, has a great effect upon us. It pervades everything, pervades our lives, it appears everywhere in all forms. It helps us, and it helps all the beings we come in contact with. It pervades everything. It's not just me and my little practice here. It spreads out to everybody, even when we don't see it. Training has immense power to transform us and help us, to relieve suffering, both for ourselves and other beings. It's a lot bigger than we are, just like Samantabhadra, a lot bigger than we are. We just open ourselves to the training, entrust ourselves to it, and try to look towards it at all times. Look towards what we need to do, as best we can, to look towards our meditation in keeping with the precepts and the other aspects we try to cultivate. Becomes the most important thing in our life, especially when we try to live by the precepts. It kind of permeates everything. And to recognize it and keep coming back to it is our duty, to recognize it, keep coming back to it, see it everywhere, like Samantabhadra, the universal goodness. Also, Samantabhadra represents loving kindness, love, universal love, loving kindness, universal goodness. Universal love is a practice of loving kindness. It's a practice. And it's not just loving one being or a few beings, it's actually love for everybody. And we can try to practice this. We do try to practice this ourselves, to practice universal love for beings. It's not trying to create warm, fuzzy feelings for everybody. That's kind of a little artificial. It's more the practice of kindness, putting kindness into practice, speaking kindly, acting kindly, thinking kindly, in thought, word, and deed, kind thoughts, kind words, kind actions, because they all work together. If you're trying to be kind but you're really crabby, it doesn't come out so well. We've got to allow kindness to permeate our minds as well, our hearts, to seep in. Universal goodness, universal love permeates us. You just need to recognize that and live from that. And that helps us to feel more benevolent, more kindly towards beings. It's not just trying to think fuzzy thoughts. It's actually practicing kindness in speech and deeds and thoughts, as I said. And it's for everybody. It's not selective. We're not just nice to the people we like. We try to be kind and charitable, benevolent, wishing well towards everybody. Not always easy to practice, but we can keep working on it. It sounds great, But then when there's somebody we don't like, or some situation that's really difficult, or we're really fed up or crabby, or something isn't working, how to remember universal goodness and kindness. But we can keep doing our best. And this love for beings includes ourselves as well as other beings. To practice loving kindness towards ourselves, to relinquish criticism and judgment, not only of other people, but also of ourselves, the endless self-criticism. It's often much harder to stop judging ourselves, to practice a little kindness and acceptance of ourselves, than to offer these to other people. I think many of us know this. Samantabhadra, he rides a huge elephant. Enormous. Samantabhadra is huge, his elephant is vast. Something like 450 yojanas high. A yojana is the distance an army can walk in one day. So that's a big elephant. And the elephant embodies patience. The patience of the saint. Patience is an underrated virtue. It's a wonderful thing to practice. The elephant walks steadily through the forest, moving logs and other obstacles out of its path, just gently picking them up. Just keeps on walking, doesn't stop, just keeps on going. And patience is like this. We just keep walking the path, keeping on going, moving the obstacles out of the way with patience. And patience is an aspect of loving kindness. It's a form of loving kindness. It's acceptance rather than judgment, love for beings rather than criticism, restraint rather than anger. Patience is the antidote to anger. And Samantabhadra, it turns out, has a lot to say about anger. In the Avatamsaka, again, where Samantabhadra plays a big part in this huge scripture, and there's a chapter on his practice. There's actually lots of chapters about him, but one chapter called The Practice of Samantabhadra. And Samantabhadra says, I do not see anything that is a bigger mistake than for bodhisattvas, that's little b, that's us, than for bodhisattvas to become angry at other bodhisattvas. Why? Because if bodhisattvas become angry at other bodhisattvas, this creates 1,000,000 obstacles. And these obstacles obstruct our practice. And Samantabhadra enumerates several hundred of these 1,000,000 obstacles. He makes a point, goes on for pages, all the obstacles that arise from indulging in anger, especially at other people who are training, because that creates disharmony in the Sangha. So we need to really work on restraining anger in thought, word, and deed, with the practice of patience and loving kindness. Well, these obstacles we've put there ourselves, with our anger, criticism, judgment, all that. And we can remove them ourselves with patience, like Samantabhadra's elephant, moving the logs in its path. No judgment, no blame, no criticism, just quietly moving the obstacles aside. Whether it's irritation with ourselves, irritation with somebody else, just not harboring that irritation or anger. Just move that log aside. Just say, I'm getting upset. Let's just let that go. Move that little log aside. Sometimes it's a big log. Keep doing our best. This is acceptance, letting go of our judgments, our expectations of ourselves, expectations of others, thinking we should be doing much better, going much faster in our training, or that things should be a lot better in our meditation, or things better in our life. Letting go of judgments of how we are doing, or how others are doing, or how we should be doing, or how they should be doing. All our judgments of how or what both we and other people should be doing, or other beings. Our criticisms of ourselves and others. This is another aspect of dealing with anger. Our judgments, our criticisms, our endless thinking, why are they doing that? They shouldn't be doing that. Why don't people do what I think they should be doing? Sitting in meditation is the epitome of patience. Sometimes it's really hard just to sit there, especially when we're fairly new at it. Everything seems to come up to stop us. Physical discomfort, mental discomfort, distraction, sleepiness. I want to do something else. I've got this thing I need to do. I haven't got time to sit today. All this stuff comes up. Everything pulling us away. External things and internal things pulling us off our seat. And to sit through it all is the practice of patience. Sometimes, yes, we need to get up and do something we've forgotten about, or something that needs attention right away. Our child is screaming in the next room. We have to get up and do something. We can't just say, oh, I'm just going to sit here. But a lot of the time, those impediments are internal, and something we can just sit through. If we're in extreme pain, it's not a good idea just to sit through it and have tears running down our faces, as it happened to me when I first started to meditate. It's not very helpful. Adjust the body. Give it a little kindness and sit. The sitting does not depend on a perfect full lotus posture. It took me a long time to figure that out. Just to practice patience and acceptance. I have the body I have the mind I have. I wish my mind was completely still, pure, like a still pond, clear down to the bottom. Why is it all in turmoil and full of fish and debris and mud and stuff, Just to let it settle and just do our best to be still with it all. To be still with our impatience, our discomfort, our unstillness. To try to sit beneath that unstillness. Do our best. This is all part of Samantabhadra's practice, that practice of patience, sitting still with all the things that arise. And the dynamic aspect of keeping going. The elephant keeps walking. He doesn't stop. He just keeps on moving. Moves aside the logs, keeps on going. Doesn't rush, doesn't stop. Slowly moving through. An elephant has a lot of power, big. Pretty hard to stop an elephant that size. Just keeps on going. This is our practice. To keep on going with the power of our practice, of our endeavor, our aspiration. Keeps on going. Patience is an aspect of love for beings. To love beings selflessly, not because we want something. To do that, we need to be endlessly patient with beings. People don't always do what we want them to do. They aren't always the way we want them to be. We just have to accept them as they are, with patience and with gratitude and with love. Gratitude for them that they're being there, they're there in our life. Even when they annoy us, they're there. They're doing their best, and we can learn something from them. Even if we wish they were on some other planet, actually to try to be grateful that there they are. Sometimes, an old monk once, you would say, when somebody would be really driving them crazy, they would say, this person has been here to teach me has been sent here to teach me patience. But it wasn't just literally why they came, but the monk could learn patience from dealing with this person. So we can learn patience from dealing with people who we find difficult. Not to wish them on another planet. To accept them with patience and with loving kindness, which is, as I said, universal, not just for the people we like. And doing our best to help where help is needed, as we can. Keeping to the precepts, we've just had a retreat on meditation and the precepts. Patience and restraint help us to keep to the precepts. Accepting beings, accepting situations, accepting ourselves helps us to keep to the precepts. Yes, we may need to make changes and to restrain ourselves when we get impatient, upset, angry, or just frustrated, tired, bored, fed up, whatever it might be. All that dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness. To be patient as best we can with all of that. Keeping to the precepts is to practice patience. To sit in meditation helps us to cultivate patience and keeping to the precepts. To do our best to meditate in our daily life helps us to keep to the precepts. to restrain our ill will and our greed and anger and selfishness and ignorance and all that, and to practice patience and loving kindness. Meditation and the precept work together. Samantabhadra. I love Samantabhadra. Bodhisattva of universal goodness and the Bodhisattva of practice. Something we can do. Well, we can do it all, but the physical practice, And it's up to us to see universal goodness and to manifest it in our own daily practice. By our faithful meditation, doing our best to keep to the precepts. We can see goodness in other beings as best we, when we try to practice goodness ourselves, we can see it in others more easily. We're not obstructing it with all those impediments that Samantabhadra was talking about, which I didn't go into. We can see our connection with other beings. We can see the goodness in other beings when we're trying to keep to the precepts and meditate ourselves. Everybody has the nature of goodness, somewhere in there. It just needs to be allowed to come forth. Terrible things happen. People do dreadful things, awful things. We've seen them. And yet, universal goodness is there within all of us. We just don't see it, just like space. Just trust that it's there. To look and try to see it. And when we don't see it, to trust that it's there. We need to trust in it, and we need to show it ourselves as universal goodness, to act on that universal goodness rather than on our anger, hatred, ill will, all that. Love for all beings and all things. We can manifest this. We can let it come forth. We may not do it all the time, but we can keep coming back to it and doing our best. Because it is our own true nature. It's the Buddha nature which is in all of us. The real nature of everything. It is our fundamental state, actually. We just cover it up with all the other things. Selfishness, really. And it's the nature of Samantabhadra. There he is. Huge being, just like empty space, filling everything, permeating everything. So big we can't even see it. To trust it, to live by it, to live in harmony with that universal goodness. That's Samantabhadra's teaching for us today. And thank you to our online retreatants who stuck with us for all these 3 days, came to the talks, came to the discussions, and I hope it's all been helpful. And thank you, everybody.